Hi, this is Nikki from Little Blue Artworks and welcome to the Needle Felted Moon and Stars tutorial. We're going to begin our project with our needle felting pads and our large needle felting needle. This is colour coded in green in a gauge size 32. For those who have never needle felted before, the needle felting needles normally come in a triangular shape with an extremely sharp point. Along each edge of the triangle are 3 small barbs. As you're pushing the needle through the wool, this begins to agitate the fibres and mat them together so you can form and sculpt shapes with the fibres. And this is the felting process. You can use finger protectors or plasters on your fingers as you're needle felting to protect them, or just be extra careful while using the needles as they're very sharp. So first we're going to begin by taking some core wool. This is very rough wool, which is going to make the inside of our moon. And it looks like rather a lot at the moment, but this will be felted down into a smaller size and shape until we have a really nice firmly felted and dense sphere to make into our moon. You may find some pieces of grass between the fibres, but you can just remove these, or eventually they will be covered up with some white carded batting at the end. But to begin the process, I'm just going to half that down to make the first inner core of our moon, and then we'll build on top of it from there. So taking that in half, just pulling it roughly apart, I'm going to now scrunch this into a ball shape. So I'm going to do it just by rolling as tightly as I can to make the very inside of the moon. So I've got a very tight piece rolled here, and I'm just going to fold in the 2 sides, and then continue to roll and also continue to fold in. This doesn't have to be a perfect sphere shape, but it's a good size of dense piece of wool at this stage. And I'm going to hold that down on my mat and begin to push the needle through the fibres. And as you push the needle through, be careful not to push it where your fingers or your thumb is at this point. You can begin to hear a crunch as the needle goes through. This means it has started the felting process inside the core of this piece of wool. Once you become confident with it and you're staying well away from your fingers and thumbs, you can begin stabbing a bit more vigorously through the middle of your ball of wool there. This is then felting the inside of that ball of wool. The fibres will begin to mat together and it will begin to hold in shape the more you do this. Now I've somewhat felted that, I'm just going to move it around on my mat to another position. And again, holding that and squashing that down onto the mat to begin felting this next side of it. If you want to start with an even smaller piece and build it up from there, that's also a great idea. And build up slowly in your own time. Now I've done some felting on this side. I'm again going to take it off my mat, turn it slightly, holding this part down. Here I can start to see the ends of the fibres where I'd wrap that round itself. So I definitely want to felt these firmly down so that they stick and mat with the other fibres. And I'm still squishing this piece of wool quite hard in my hand. I'm just going to continue to turn that and felt it. The side's got even more of those shorter fibres, so I'm going to carefully felt them in. Being very careful here of my thumb and my finger on this side too. So I'm just sticking in the middle here as I'm firmly felting that in. You can see the fibres are coming down where I felted. And then here, I'm just going to move my thumb out the way and get this part felted down a bit. Moving my thumb out the way again, felting this area, and just keep turning and felting in every area, especially where you find the ends of the fibres here. You want to felt that down so it begins to hold together. You can see all these loose fibres here have been felted down to connect with the rest of the wool. And these looser fibres here, I'm just going to continue to felt them down. I'm just going to move on to using my double needle here, just to speed up this process. And I'm still stabbing quite hard now as I'm beginning to shape it into a sphere. So at this point, all the loose fibres are now stuck together. So we've got a nice big matted piece of wool at this stage. It's not perfectly sphere shaped. What we're going to do is continue to felt that down into a nice solid piece of felted wool. And anywhere where you want the size of the wool to come down, that's where you'll felt it. So here and here, it's become a bit of a long shape, so I'm going to be coming in this way. But if I felt this way only, it will become flat. So I'm always going to make sure to turn it and felt it in different places as I'm going over and over the shape. This is something that takes a little bit of time and a lot of stabbing. And if you enjoy the stabbing process, then this is definitely for you. Just be careful not to tense your shoulder or your arm or your wrist too much as you're working on your felted project. Just relax into your project and take your time and enjoy watching that come down in size as you work on it. It's going to be a beautiful sphere shape when we're done. Sometimes like to squish it down on the mat as I'm felting, just to help and encourage those fibres to really come together and make it lovely and dense as I'm getting them to hold and felt together. I've now got that in a really nice firmly felted sphere shape. It's not perfect at the moment, but I'm not looking for perfection right now. This is going to be the inner core of our lovely moon. And so we've got one at this shape. I'm just going to build on it slightly to increase its size. Taking some more of that core wool, I've just got a small handful here. I'm just going to spread that out with my hands to make a little bit of a mat to go over my moon. Just like so. Holding that over, should go right the way around. Like this. Here's the ends of the fibres, and I'm going to start here to begin to get them to hold. Careful of your fingers, so just some light taps there, and that should hold quite nicely to the top. Now they're holding on, I can just begin to attach the rest of the fibres by turning and stabbing just as I did before, and this is going to build up the size of our lovely big felted full moon. And I'll speed this part up. Have that layer built up, I can decide if that's the size I want to stop with, but I'm just going to go ahead and continue to build up layers over my moon until I've got a lovely big round felted sphere shape that I can make into my beautiful blue moon. And we'll just skip ahead to that part. So carry on with your felting, take your time, relax into it, and remember to keep your shoulders and your wrists relaxed as you're felting, and just enjoy the experience of stabbing beautiful wool. Okay, so now I've been working for quite some time getting this lovely big sphere of wool nicely felted. If you find your wool is really bumpy and you'd like to try smoothing it out a little bit, what I want you to do is just tap over the surface with your large needle. Every time you see a little bump, if you just tap that down, and it'll help smooth out the surface until the texture of the ball of wool has got a really nice felted appearance over the surface area. Take your time with this, as this will really help give it that overall lovely rounded feeling. Keep working on your shape until you have it as sphere-like as you possibly can, and at this stage mine's been felted down very small, very firm, so the more you felt it and the more time you spend on it, the lovelier this piece of wool is going to become. Next we're going to move on to putting on some white colour on the surface of our moon. I'm going to use my felting pad here just to hold the moon in place, and I have around about 10 grams of this lovely bright white carded batting wool, and it's very clean and easy to work with like the core wool. Not quite as rough, but still very, very easy to felt and work with. You can just take a pinch off at a time. It's easy to take apart, and I'm just going to fan that out into a little bit of a flat piece of felt and just pop that over the top there to begin working on it. And then I'm going to start just tapping over the surface with my needle. I'm not doing big stabs anymore, as I'm only working on the surface area. And the more tapping you do over this part, the smoother it's going to look and the end. So now you can see this part's firmly attached on. I'm just going to move on to another part by turning the ball and tapping over that area too, until that whole piece is all nicely felted down. Now that piece is on, I'm just going to continue to build up each part of the sphere to completely cover it in this lovely bright wool. And I'll continue to tap it with my needle, and I might use a variety of my own favourite needles for this part, but you can use either your 32 or your 36. If you're using my needles, it's either the green, which is the large, or the pink, which is the medium, to continue tapping that in over the surface, really working on that nice smooth texture and getting it a nice bright white. And I'll speed this part up. I've got that all covered up with the white. If you find any small bits, you can just take off small pinches and work over that area. Just to show you here what I'm using, it's a needle felting pen and it can hold up to 3 needles. You can find these in a lot of the craft stores, or you can find them online. I find these work nicely for doing the surfaces of things. It just speeds up the process, but sometimes it's nice just to work with the one needle and just relax into it in a nice comfy space until you've got that looking all smooth. So any little bumps, you just want to tap over that area to smooth that surface down and continue to work away on your lovely moon until you're happy with a nice smooth appearance, and give it a nice little rub afterwards with your hands just to take out any needle marks that you have there. Any extra pieces of felt sticking up after you've given it a little rub, you're just going to need to re-tap over the surface again to reconnect them and smooth out that area. And the more time that you take with this project, the smoother and nicer and finished it's going to look at the end of the project. Okay, so I'm fairly happy now with my felted moon. It's all nicely smoothed over in a nice sphere shape. It feels really good, and because there's lots of wool in there, it's got a little bit of weight to it, and it's just really nice to hold in the hands, and I really like the feel of it too. We're going to add a little bit of details to the surface of the moon just to bring it out a little bit more, giving it a slightly more realistic look of the moon. I'm going to be using mainly 2 colours, which is greys and blues, and this part is completely optional. We'll move on to that next. So for this next part, we're going to be adding some colour to our lovely moon. You can use either your medium or your large needle to connect the fibres on. We're just going to do some gentle tapping as we do so. I'm going to be using a variety of my favourite needles, including the needle felting pen here holding 3 needles and a needle felting holder holding 2 needles. This one I made with 2 medium-sized 36 needles and some air dry clay. First we're going to start by adding some grey. I have 2 different types of grey here. I've got a medium grey and then I've got this mixed light grey with the white here. I'm going to start with this lighter one here, and all I'm going to do is just take off small pinches to pop onto our moon. I'm just going to space out those fibres so it's a nice and light and not too heavy on the moon to start adding little bits of shading. And I'm just going to do this randomly all over my moon. If you want to, you could look at pictures of the moon to try and get it, the details looking more aligned to what the moon has. But I'm just going to make this up as I go along. And I'm going to use my needle here to give it some small taps over that area, keeping it nice and smooth and not distorting the sphere shape underneath. Now we've got a slight bit of colour there. I'm going to add some more in a different area. Here I'm going to have slightly thicker. I'm just going to build it up by placing my finger on the side of the wool and then pulling it away. until I've got a nice area there to work with. So you can see the height of it there. It's just sitting on top, and I'm just going to tap that in to connect it down. And I'm doing really light taps as I do this. This will help just to blend it in with the white there, giving it the illusion of a little bit of shadow. Now that other piece on, we've got two areas there. One with a very light bit of shadow, one with a slightly darker area. And just keep building up in different areas of your sphere so that it's not all one colour and it just looks a little bit more interesting, and it's got these shadows coming in and out all over the sphere. And I'll speed this part up. Got some nice shadowy bits happening all over our moon here. I'm going to add a little bit of colour, and this is completely optional. This isn't particularly true to life, but I want to use a little bit of blue to make a blue moon. You can use any colour you like just to add a little bit of a hint of colour, and I'm just using this mid to light colour blue here. And what I'm going to do is, rather than just plop it straight on like this, is mix it. So you can try mixing it with the white, with the mid grey or the light grey. I'm going to try various combinations. So I'm going to take a piece of the blue and a piece of this light grey here and blend them together. So I have approximately the same amount of wool there, and I'm just going to pull them apart and then restack them on top of each other under my thumb, and then pull them apart again and restack them together. Continue this process until you've got a really nice blend of that grey mix with the blue there. And this can just add a little bit of a hint to those lighter areas of the moon. And that's one mix there. I'm going to try this other piece of blue with the darker grey here. This is the mid grey I have, and I'm just going to do the same to make another mix to use in different areas of the moon. Now you can see this mix is a little bit darker than this one here. And lastly, you're going to mix a tiny bit of white with some blue for that last piece, so that I've got a nice little palette here of the blues mixed in with the other colours to use. You can always add more of the white or more of the blue, depending how blue you'd like it, or if you just want just a hint and just a very small amount of blue in with one of your colours will give it a nice blend in with the rest. So here we have the whites, the light greys, and the dark greys. So I'm going to pop them aside and use them as I'm working away. I quite like this light mix here, and because we've still got quite a light moon, I'm just going to take off very small amounts and then space those fibres quite far apart. This will give it just a hint of blue in this area on top of the white, which blends really nicely. Gentle taps over that to connect. And there we have a hint of blue. I'm going to do some more of this light mix in various parts of the sphere, just to give it little hints here and there of some blue. I'm just holding on to the very end with my thumb and then pulling off parts of the wool. It will somewhat stick to it, and then I can go over it with my felting needles to connect. Any part that you don't like, you can try and take off, or you can cover up with another piece of white or grey on the top, and that will help blend it out a little bit more as well. I'm finding some of these parts here are not blending as well, for example these parts here. So I'm going to take them off and try on with a different piece. Maybe just restack that again and remix it in this part off here. So I want it to blend really well. I'm going to space those fibres out a little bit more, or you could remix them with the white. Just a very small amount of white over the top can help blend that in even further if it needs to just be stepped back a layer. And that gives that a nice subtle hint of blue in that area. So anything coming across too bluey, you can try just a very thin layer of the white or the grey over the top, tapping that on, and it'll just kick that blue bit back one layer underneath, so it's more showing through from underneath rather than sitting on the top. Now I'm just going to continue to build up some of those shadows So I've still got my medium and my darker blues here mixed with the greys, but I'm going to try now adding some of this darker grey. So if it comes across as too dark, again, you can mix it with your white or your lighter grey, or just build over it with some of your lighter colours just to step it back a layer so that it's less prominent and less eye-catching and more blending into the general sphere itself. Or you might quite like some dramatic shadows in there as well. So I'm just going to build in it by spacing out a little piece of that darker grey there, and then just placing it on an area and then gently tapping that over the surface. That will really bring in a very dark tone and shadow into that area. And it really just is a matter of continuing to add little bits here and there, and if you don't like what you have, either take it off or set it back a layer with some of the other colours, like I can do here with the white, just popping a little bit over here, keeping some of that here just to show you what that looks like. So that's kind of more blended in, and I'm just going to continue to do it. And because this is a darker colour going on light, be careful just to fan out those fibres in your hand first. Any little knots, you might want to take them out, so you've got a nice kind of see-through layer, which you can probably see better on the desk. And then I'm going to pop that just randomly in an area, might pop it in this part here, and then I'm going to tap that in with my needle. I'm going to continue to build up with the darker here and get some nice shadows going on over my sphere. Now adding in a little bit of that lighter grey in between each area and also around some of those darker patches there, just to blend it from dark to medium to light colours. And just continuing to blend all the colours together, randomly just plopping them on, some big areas, some small areas. And the more you build on this and the more you invest into your piece, just the lovelier it's going to look in the end and well finished. Don't forget some of your blues. I'm going to use some of this blue mix here in one of the darker shadowy areas. Just enjoy the process of blending and felting and putting together this beautiful sphere. And already you can see it's coming together nicely and looking more moon-like the more I work on it. I'm just going to spend a bit of time now refelting over the surface of the area. This is done best by using your medium needle, the 36, and just gently tapping over the surface just to reconnect all those little fibres, smooth out the texture of your moon. And there we go. I think I'm finished now adding all my shadows, and I'm just going to put one more detail on our moon before we're done. I'm going to be using a medium needle to do this. I recommend the medium, which is size 36, the pink one. And I'm going to go back to my white. Now what I'm looking for here is dark areas to put some marks on the moon. So if you don't have any large dark areas, you may want to add a little bit more of that darker wool to a larger area to begin to do this part here. So I'm going to take a small amount of the very white wool, and I'm just going to roll that between my fingers and thumbs to make a ball. And I'm going to pop that ball right there in the middle of that darker area, and I'm going to felt that in. I have to use my fingernail here just to hold that down. You could use another needle or a toothpick just to keep your fingers out the way, but you're just going to very gently tap that down to hold it, and I'm going to make sure it looks like it's round. So I'm just guiding any of the fibres and the edges with the tip of my needle before then tapping it down and connecting it into the moon. Now I'm really going to go around the edges a little bit more to help define that circle. Also gives it a little bit of a shadow around the outside and then also in the middle. Now we've got a nice rounded area. It looks a little bit like a crater. And then there's those other marks you get on the moon that are coming from the crater. So I'm going to make some lines coming out from this crater by just pulling on the very edges here of the fibres of the white. Now I've got a very small amount here. I'm just going to twist that with my thumbs and fingers until I've got a line to work with. So I've spun a little bit of wool there, and I'm just going to place that right over the middle of that little crater, and I'm going to attach it in by tapping through with my needle. Now this is a fine detail which you might find tricky, especially if you're a beginner or have trouble seeing up close. Hopefully you can get that attached in nicely just over there like that. And then all I'm going to do is hold those lines straight with my thumb and fingers here, and just felt the very ends down to attach it so that it stays straight here on the other side too. And then I'm going to felt along that line. I'm going to start on the outside and then felting it in. I don't want to felt it too far in because then it'll just disappear into the wool. But just enough to connect it on there. And that's a lovely little detail there. And I'm just going to continue to do that and build up some more lines coming out of the crater the same way. Some will be thicker, some will be thinner. You might want to do it in different directions. I've got one coming here at an angle from the other one. This line's a little bit thicker, which is fine, it'll be easier for me to connect. But these lines and these craters on the moon are definitely not all the same as each other. So I'm going to connect the outside, the very end of the line first, then go through the rest of it with my needle. And then the other side. And you can just keep adding to your heart's content. I'm going to add a few more, some short and some long, some thicker and some thinner. Finish popping on those lines. I'm just going to redo the middle bit there because the lines are quite prominent inside that circle where the crater is, so I'm just adding a little bit of wool over the top just to smooth that out a bit, and then tapping it on again in a circle just to remake that crater. At this point you can also use your thinner needle here. The smallest one I have is the size 38, and this is color coded in red. This is the thinnest needle and probably the best to work at doing these little lines with, so it won't distort the shape. But just try out the various needles and see how they feel working on different areas of your project. This is also the most breakable needle, being the thinnest. So it's definitely one you don't want to bend as you're working with. And there we have a lovely little crater with some marks, and it's really giving it a bit more of a realistic feel for the moon. And you can add as many or as little as you like of this little detail. I'm just going to continue to work on mine until I finish this project and got it finished looking how I'd like it to look, and just enjoy the process as you go. And there we go, guys. I'm quite happy with my lovely moon. It feels really nice to touch and to hold, and all I have to do is decide where I'm going to display it, if I want to hang it up or just display it somewhere sitting as it is. But we're also going to be adding a few lovely stars to the project, and that's coming up next. So this is a nice, simple, quick and easy part of the project which you can enjoy. I have here on my mat a cookie cutter. This is going to help shape the wool into the star, and I'm going to be using my large green needle, the size 32, to do this. I'm going to take some of my lovely white carded wool, just a good pinch there. I'm going to plop it right inside the cookie cutter. Now I'm going to be careful as I'm holding it with my finger and thumb that I don't stab on the outside of the cookie cutter. I don't want to give myself an injury. So you're just going to very slowly start to push through the fibres inside the cutter until you see the wool coming down in size. Now you can see that's come down a little bit there. I'm going to add a little bit more wool into each of the corner of the star shape. So I'm going to take a small pinch off here. I'm just going to fold that over my thumb. So I've got a small loop of thicker wool there that I'm going to put into the corner of that cookie cutter, and then just begin to stab that in the very corner, just to make sure that's just as thick as the middle of the star. I'm going to do that with each of the corners. Now, one thing to remember before you go felting that completely flat down is that the fibres of your wool is going to stick to the fibres of your mat. So if you over felt it, you're going to have a lot of trouble taking that off the mat. So what I'm going to do is actually take it out the cookie cutter just now, and you can see it's already sticking to the mat there, but I haven't over felted it too much. I've only begun to felt it, so it should be easy enough to peel off and leave your felting mat to be able to use again. So I'm just going to pop that back on and shove it back inside the cookie cutter and begin to felt that over the area again. Now I've felted that down even more, I'm going to do the same again. Make sure to take it off your felting mat, and you can see it's starting to hold together and is quite thick at this point. So I'm going to turn it over the other way, and now I'm going to try and shove it back inside the cookie cutter to continue working on the shape and have the other side get nicely firmly felted as well. As you're doing this, really concentrate on the very edges of your star, especially inside the tops of the corners, making sure that's really nice and firmly felted in those areas, and that'll really help define the shape of your star. And the more you felt this, the firmer your star is going to be, and the more finished your star is going to be. So again, before I over felt it to the mat, I'm going to take it off, and you can see the shape's really nicely coming together now. This is the side that was underneath, so it's gotten very fuzzy. So you can continue to use your star cookie cutter to do the shape, but I'm just going to start free felting over the entire shape just now, just getting that down in size and felting it to a nice thickness on both sides. I'm also going to get the needle coming in between each part of those outer bits of the star, and that will help define the shape a little bit as well. Now I'm going to go over each little triangle on the outside, just bringing the edges in by coming in this way with my needle, but I'm not going right through because I would end up hurting my fingers. I'm just doing little taps now on the surface of each side. You can continue to use your cookie cutter to save your fingers here, or just try doing little taps along each edge there. I just prefer to work this way. And I'm not really stabbing right through. Again, just those small taps are enough to take down the texture and just work that area of the felt so it's got a smoother appearance and a neater form. I'm going to do this on both sides. So again, coming in between each of those little triangles and also going up the sides to shape it and finish felting it nicely. If you need to, you can always add on a little bit more wool to any parts that are maybe missing a bit of wool, and use your cookie cutter shape just to help attach that on if you need to. Continue to work on your little star until you've got a really nice, firmly felted little piece of wool that's holding its shape well. Now I'm just going to squish and twist each part of the triangle here. That's just going to help further define those areas. Both sides should be nicely firmly felted, but I'm going to give it a little bit of a rub between my hands just to smooth out those fibres there on either side. This also helps give it a bit more of a finished look. And there we have a lovely little felted star to help decorate your home, and you can make as many as you like. Now I have my moon and stars all finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and enjoyed your crafting today. If you'd like to try any of my other tutorials, you can find them on my website at littleblueartworks.com. I also have a range of large kits and mini kits to try, as well as online workshops and monthly subscription boxes. Take care, stay crafty, and thanks for watching.